Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast presented by our friends over at Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, Briar Greaves Insurance are the best people in the business to work with. So visit briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. We have a great show lined up for you today. Going to talk about the Bucs that must have a great season this year. We know some of the biggest names have to go off for this team to be on a Super Bowl run, but who are some of those players that might be right in the middle? Maybe they have to have a great season for themselves. Maybe the key to the Bucs making it to the Super Bowl again is through these players. We're going to talk about a couple of guys and also talk about the announcement of Simeon Rice going into the Bucs Ring of Honor. He spoke today. We got some videos to play. So let's get into it. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me, a guest co-host, but also a fellow co-host of mine. It's Josh Capo from PewterReport.com joining the show today. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. How's it going?
I'm doing well, Matt. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk about this topic and start really looking forward to the 2025 season now that the roster is I'd say 99% kind of locked in at this point. You really start looking forward and seeing how does this team shape up and who are they relying on to have a big season in order for the team to be successful.
By the way, you were fantastic during our draft show with all the comments coming in with notes. And I appreciate you've been fantastic when you're there. We missed you a ton, but you were very much there in spirit. But why I wanted to bring that up is because we did discuss during the live draft show and even throughout that there's still such a long way to go with building this roster, but most of it is complete because we've gone through the meat and potatoes of free agency and the draft. So now that we've talked about it, but we've had time to think about it more, what are your biggest takeaways just from what Tampa Bay has done through the draft with free agency? Things you loved, things you liked, and maybe some other things that you still have some questions about.
Yeah, I think I spent way too much time looking at linebackers for our draft coverage. It's really, it taught me a valuable lesson, I will say. Sometimes I think media and fans alike can get so locked into a perceived need that I'm going to include myself on this, we start to elevate options just simply out of need, right? Yeah. And so, there were so many linebackers that I personally scouted, and I was like, okay, well, acknowledging it wasn't a great linebacker class, but then still saying, but they need a linebacker, so this is the best of the bunch, or this is the number 3 or 4, so I guess they're going to have to go here. And then watching it kind of play out, and we saw only 4 linebackers went in the top 100, and then 2 of them were in the top 33, right? Yeah. So you could see there was this giant drop off, and you could see that the Bucs themselves aren't going to necessarily reach for a perceived need. I think it also told us that they're way higher on Servassier Dennis and we've been reporting on this at Pewter Report. We've been reporting. Yeah. The team is high on Servassier Dennis. They've spoken about it a lot in the offseason. I don't think anybody, ourselves included, realized how high they are on him and how much they feel confident in him getting the opportunity to start, and they wanted to hit clear path for him. Just talking with other people around the league, if Servassier Dennis was in this draft, there's a good chance he was probably linebacker 3. Plus, he has a couple years, in an NFL system, working an NFL program. He's probably a better option, or at least the Bucs think he's a better option than almost any linebacker that was in this draft.
I think whether you talk about this year's draft or even last year's draft, I think what the Bucs keep showing year in and year out is that they're never desperate for a draft pick. Like, yes, they will trade up and get Tristan Wirfs, but only if they're like really super, super sure about it. So then, like, you go into this year and everything you just talked about with the linebackers, it's extremely accurate, where just because you need a position right then and there doesn't mean you're going to go out and take it. I mean, I think that's why it was such a huge surprise too with going with Emeka Egbuka in the first round, because the Bucs they just know how to build a team. They are so well rounded, and therefore they just kind of have carte blanche sometimes when it comes to these picks.
Yeah. And it's funny, you hear people inside and outside the league and people who cover the league talk about, it's the best strategy is to take the best player available until you see a team actually do it. And then everyone loses their minds. What? We have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan as the second coming. Why in the world would they pick wide receiver 4 in the first round? He was heads and tails the best player available. And yes, you do end up with tiers of players. And it was just clear from that selection that he was in a class all by himself among the players that were and above all of the defensive options that were available there. And there's a good chance that the team thought all of the defensive options that were available at 19, that there were still going to be a few of those guys left in the second round from that same tier. So I think that I will only speak for myself personally. Yeah. I learned a ton from how the Bucs approached this draft. And, it was really cool kind of getting to step outside of my preconceived notions and really get a different perspective on it. So I'm really excited. I think the Bucs also understand that defense is a much more volatile side of the ball. And there's a good chance that people who underperformed last year are probably going due for some positive regression. And if they can just get better athletes on the field, there's a good chance that the defense is going to look better than it did in 2024. And they don't need a top 5 or top 10 defense. They just need a better defense than they had last year. They definitely got better athletes. They got faster up front on the line. They got, I think, more athletic, just with Dennis returning, and Anthony Walker, I think, is a much more athletic and reliable option than KJ Britt. So there's the linebackers. And they certainly added a ton of athleticism to the secondary. So you look at that, it may not have been the individual picks that a lot of people were looking for. Some of them were. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about, most people think Benjamin Morrison probably would have been a first rounder if not for the hip issues. But they added athleticism, they added speed at all 3 levels of the defense. That was really what we've been talking about for the last 8, 9, 10 months. If they can just add more athleticism, more speed, they did that on the defensive side of the ball and didn't really lose. And they actually added on the offensive side of the ball, right? That first round pick. So I think, all things considered, I would say that this roster has the potential to be more talented than last year's roster. And that bodes well for the team.
Yeah, not only did they go with 1 wide receiver, they went with 2 wide receivers, bookending it with Ibuka and then, of course, Tez Johnson. But I wanted to get your thoughts about the Bucs going back-to-back with the cornerback position, because I'm with you. Morrison, I was a big fan of. Just anytime you get a guy that welcomes the opportunity to go one-on-one against some of the best, that's always a player that I want on my team. And then Parrish, I was like okay with it at the time, but then what he did at Bucs rookie minicamp, I think everyone might be a little bit even more excited about Jacob Parrish right now than Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah, I think that what it does is it gives the team options, right? It's hard to play cornerback in the NFL as a rookie. Not many succeed year one. I think the Eagles really kind of threaded the needle last year with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, right? Like both of them ended up playing really well. Most rookie cornerbacks struggle, which is why I like the addition of both of them, plus keeping Jamel Dean, plus bringing back Bryce Hall, who has experience being successful in the NFL level, and bringing in a true competitor like Kendall Vildor. Yeah. So when you look at like all of those elements put together, they've really covered a lot of bases in terms of saying, and I think I wrote about this once, and it's just a saying. I used to be a merchant marine, and when we used to have a saying, you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. And when it comes to the secondary, the Bucs have tied a lot, right? So they've I think deployed enough resources that the goal is some combination of these guys should be good enough for us to really compete for a championship. So they approached it from all, just about every angle you could think of. They approached it from retention with Hall and with Young. They approached it from a free agency standpoint, finding some value with Vildor. He's proven that he can play on a championship level team with his time at Detroit as a depth guy, and then with some draft pedigree with both of these corners. So I like that approach, and I'm going to use this as a transition. I'm going to try my best, Mark Cook, which is why I think it's so important that Zyon McCollum has a big season.
So Zyon McCollum is one of your top picks for players that need to be great this season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in order for them to be successful. Do you feel like Zyon, I guess you could say this about every corner on the Bucs or every player in the secondary. Zyon, with all the interceptions that he had in school, and I get it that it wasn't like a big powerhouse like some of these other players, but it feels like he's figuratively and literally dropping the ball when it comes to a guy that could just be a game changer for this team. If this is the year he could put it together, who knows what he's going to get in free agency.
Yeah. I think he's taken several really awesome steps forward. I think that that's probably one of maybe two things left for him to do to actually just become a premier corner in the NFL. He has that upside. He was touching that upside probably the first 4 or 5 weeks of last year, fell off a little bit after that. So, but that would certainly go a long way. We've seen corners who are boom or bust get huge dollars. You go to Dallas with Trayvon Diggs, right? Diggs, he got paid after having just an absolutely bonkers interception season where he got burned a lot in coverage. And then the following year, was it the following year or maybe 2 years later? I can't remember where the knee injury came in. But after he got paid, the interceptions came down, but the coverage got a little bit better. I think Zyon has a rare opportunity to kind of add those two things together. I think it's critical for him to have a really great season because I think most people are just assuming he's going to be really good this year, right? And there's a lot of evidence to point towards that. From year 1 to year 2, big step forward. From year 2 to year 3, big step forward. I think everybody is expecting him to either maintain last year's performance or kick it up a notch. And cornerback play is so volatile, right?
Yeah.
But all the talk of Jamel Dean and the injury issues and what are they going to do with that side at corner, I think some fans are talking about like Dean he's absolutely going to be a backup come week 1. And I would say if he's healthy, he's probably he's the starting corner. And then there's a lot of uncertainty around the nickel position, especially with Tyke probably moving to safety. Everyone's assuming Zion's just got this other side locked down. And if his play is volatile in the wrong direction, well, now you've got uncertainty at all 3 cornerback positions, right? So it is so important that Zyon maintains or levels up from where he was on a very strong 2024 season, because if he doesn't, then, chaos can ensue.
So are you saying it's a more important season for Zyon, or what about Jamel Dean? Because Jamel Dean, he needs to stay healthy, but there's a lot more to it for him to, be a key contributor for the Bucs this season.
I would say it's more important for Zyon because I see very few outcomes for Jamel Dean where he is on this team next year. Okay. If he doesn't play well or if he's injured, he's going to be cut because the Bucs can easily save the money and they'll have 2 corners that they drafted on day 2 with a year of experience in the NFL. They are clearly creating a post Jamel Dean, plan, right? And I think a lot of people just assume he's going to get hurt. He's not going to play well. And that is what's going to happen. But let's assume he does play well. Well, he's got 1 year left on his deal. The Bucs will probably be looking to extend Zyon in the next 3 to 15 months. Are they really going to keep 3 players in their secondary on high paychecks? Because you still have Antoine Winfield Jr. I don't think that they do. But if he's able to reestablish value, then you have an opportunity to basically do what they did with Carlton Davis, right? Let's
Yeah.
move on from Jamel. Let's recoup some draft capital. Let's save some cap money. And we have somebody in-house with at least a year's experience who we feel can now move into that starting role. So for Jamel, I mean, obviously he needs to have a good season for himself to just not get cut, potentially get traded, maybe a trade and he gets extended by a new team. I think that's not super likely, but just to keep that value or rebuild that value, I think for the Bucs, Zyon is the more important key because Zyon is more likely to be here long term.
Yeah, I think that's very well put and great insight as always. We had Zyon McCollum on the show recently, so make sure you check out that episode. That Zyon
Another
McCollum.
reason why he has to have a great season. He needs to sign an extension to continue his annual tradition of coming on the Pewter Report podcast. So now we've got it at 3 different levels for Zyon.
Yeah, that's true. All right, yeah. If we're ranking the importance of those levels, we could do another podcast about that as well. But yeah, it is very interesting looking at this overall cornerback room because you have a veteran trying to stay, a veteran that's ready to kind of take the next big step in terms of Zyon, and then everybody else bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I also think the depth is way better at corner this year than it was last year. I think the same with outside linebacker, which I want to get your opinion on in just a moment. Let's get to some comments, too. We have roll call coming up in just a moment. Bry says, Morrison is going to help the defense a lot, even if it's as a package / rotational piece. Do you see the Bucs doing that with Benjamin Morrison? Or I feel like it would be more Parrish than Morrison.
Yeah, so I think everybody's assuming Parrish is going to be the nickel. And I'm sure he's going to be given that opportunity. But I also think Morrison's going to be given the chance to be a nickel, especially if Jamel is healthy. Because like I said earlier, if Jamel's healthy, I do foresee him being the starting corner opposite of Zyon come week 1. And then it's like, okay, you invested a 2nd-round pick on Morrison, a 3rd-round pick in Parrish. I think the Bucs would want to have Morrison out on the field, all other things being equal. So they've got more draft capital tied up in him or resources, if you prefer. So I think a lot of people are assuming Parrish is a nickel. I think Todd Bowles went out of his way to dispel that notion. I think he's an outside guy who can play inside. I think he probably feels the same way with Morrison. Just in general, the way offenses are playing so condensed these days, I think most NFL teams are now looking at all corners as they have to be able to play outside and inside. And I think both players, if Morrison ends up healthy and able to make a real go at a position battle in training camp, I think Morrison is given probably a slight leg up to that nickel position over Parrish. And it's a good problem to have where you have, 3 guys vying for 2 positions and you feel good about all 3.
Yeah, if they have a complete fulfillment of depth players across the board at one spot, I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. Brian S. says, last year, Antoine Winfield Jr. got the biggest DB contract ever, $21 million per year. 1 year later, it jumped to $30 million on Stingley's contract. If Zyon can get first-team All-Pro, that's a lock for $30 million a year. Is that how you see it, Josh?
Probably not that high. There are certain positions where draft pedigree becomes a much larger part of the equation, and cornerback is definitely one of those. If you look at non-first and second round corners and the history of their contracts, they come in so much lower than guys who were first and second rounders. Great example of that is Christian Benford, who just got an extension from the Bills. Now, part of that is also the Bills, I do believe, have a private investigator digging up dirt on all of their players that they extend because they always get a discount on those guys. They did on Rousseau. They did on Shakir. Like, they're just great at locking their guys up, not only early, but for discounts. But with Zyon, I think it would definitely push him over 20 million, maybe even into that 22 to 25 range. I doubt he gets to 30 like Stingley did. So if you look at the guys who are pushing that up, they're all former first rounders. Pat Surtain, Stingley, JC Horn, all those guys are former first rounders, and draft pedigree is huge when it comes to the corner market.
Very, very true. One more Bucs fan says, I like Morrison and Parrish. they have a lot of potential, and they've already brought some excitement with Morrison just being able to practice than Parrish impressing the coaches. So, yeah, we'll see how they pan out in their rookie year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're a little fashionably late right now, but that's okay. We're at the start of the week, and sometimes we are fashionably late when it comes to this, but it is after 4:20 on a Monday, and when we are in our regular locations for the Pewter Report podcast on Mondays, we like to do this little thing called roll call. So the thing is, we have the best fans in all of the world. We love our Bucs fans here in Tampa, but we also have fans all over the world, both in the U.S. and internationally as well. So since we are here for roll call, what we're going to do is, Josh, I'm going to ask you about the outside linebacker room, get your overall opinion on how this group is going to look this year, Hassan Reddick, some of the new draft picks and all that stuff. And in the meantime, if our fans want to start putting the location where they're watching from, we'll put it up on the screen like James Hamilton in Louisville, Kentucky. So Josh, whenever you're ready, share with us your thoughts about the Bucs outside linebacker room.
Well, I'm excited for the opportunities that the team has given each of the individual players, I think, where there's promise, right? So Hassan Reddick, I think it was a very smart move because for the price they paid, I don't think there was any other edge rusher available who has the same upside as Reddick from the free agent market. So a lot of people might say Khalil Mack didn't make it to free agency. He re-signed with the Chargers, right? So if you look at Reddick versus Josh Sweat, Reddick is the better pass rusher at their best. Now, obviously, he comes with some uncertainty, and that's why the Bucs were able to get such a great deal on him at $14 million for the year. But he also has something that he needs to prove. So I think that they put themselves in a really great position to take advantage of a motivated player. Then you add in Yaya Diaby. I think Diaby took several steps forward last year. I know a lot of people may say that they were disappointed that the sack numbers fell off, but he was a much better pass rusher year 2 than he was year 1. And towards the end of the year, he really started to win high side more. Whereas early in the year, he was winning inside a ton, almost exclusively. So a well-rounded Yaya with Reddick performing even to 85% of what he was before his holdout last year. I think that you have a much improved pass rush from what they were last year. And then the Bucs I don't want to say went out of their way, but they made sure there was still a pathway for Chris Braswell, who at the end of the year, his pass rush numbers were improving. The technique was improving. He was starting to win more consistently. And then I love the addition of David Walker. And I think Scott has said that he heard from people inside the Bucs building that Walker really impressed during rookie minicamp. I know I got a text or two saying the same thing, for everything that they thought he was, they were still impressed at what he was able to show for those first few days. So I think that they've created a lot of potential upside at that position. And when you add that to the creativity that Todd Bowles exhibits when he creates pressure plans, I think that it gives the team a lot of opportunity to be a wrecking force here in 2025. Does that mean that it will happen? No, it doesn't mean that it will happen, but there's certainly the possibility. As I kind of stated earlier on the podcast, there's a lot of volatility when it comes in to the to defense, just in general. You look at it year over year, there's a lot of volatility there. You add speed. I wrote an article recently about how Reddick and Walker are both kind of, they win with speed. And I think that that's going to be a huge help because most offenses get the ball out quicker against the Bucs than they do against the rest of the league. So for this team, more than most, winning quickly at the line of scrimmage on the defensive line is so incredibly important. And they prioritize that with Reddick. They prioritize that with Walker, and they're still giving opportunities to some of their day 2 picks from the last couple of years to continue to ascend. The one thing I'll kind of leave people with on my rant here is that second-year pass rushers are typically much more productive than rookies. And so I think that people kind of forget about that with Braswell because he didn't have this super productive rookie season. There's a huge step up from year 1 to year 2 for edge rushers, and they get much more productive in their second year. So there's still a lot of possibility with Braswell.
Appreciate all your thoughts about that, Josh. And I felt with this year's outside linebacker room, to me, worst case scenario, the floor isn't as bad as what the floor would have been for last season. Because I think your main questions with outside linebacker, with Reddick, for sure, it's, is he going to be the guy that he was on the Jets last year, or can he be that double-digit sack player he was with the Eagles and some other teams a couple of seasons ago? Braswell, it's what is he going to do anything in year 2? How does he take that next jump? Can he take that next jump? Certainly with Walker, it's all about, how does he acclimate to tougher competition playing in the NFL level? And then with Yaya, was 7.5 sacks when he was a rookie 2 years ago his best, or does he have even more? And the reason why I'm bringing up all of these questions is because I don't think the Bucs are going to go 0 for 4. I don't think the worst case scenario for all the outside linebackers we just mentioned, I don't think that's going to happen to all of them. Now, there are different degrees of, would you rather have them hit with Hassan Reddick being the Hassan Reddick he was with the Eagles versus, Walker getting 4 sacks on the season? You kind of have to balance that out. But the overall depth, I just feel like 1 or 2 of these have to hit. And if 1 or 2 of these do, you mentioned it earlier, like the Bucs offense had this high scoring team, but they also had to score 35 to 40 points because the defense forced the offense back onto the field.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I love that you brought it up is, with almost every roster move, you're making some type of bet. Some are low risk, high reward bets. Those are very few. Some are high risk, high reward. Some are low risk, low reward. The Bucs have made some calculated bets, but the chances that they lose every one of them, I guarantee you they have better luck than I do at the craps tables. And they're going to hit on at least a couple of these. So I love the way that you frame that, and I couldn't agree with it more.
No, I appreciate that very much. I think another thing everybody would agree with is that if you're working with insurance people, there's nobody better to work with than Briar Greaves Insurance, the official insurance of PewterReport.com. If you're a longtime podcast listener, you probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years, and there simply isn't a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. So whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Briar Greaves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S. Or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That is 813-876-4166. And tell them that Pewter Report sent you. So shout out to Briar Greaves. Also, want to give a shout out to everybody that participated in roll call today. Another nice turnout. Appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy days to rock and roll with us each and every Pewter Report podcast episode, but specifically on Mondays. So let me just pull up some of the people that we'll mention today, starting with Dade Los, 33, watching from Tampa, Florida. Jeff the Champ over in New Bern, North Carolina. D. Diaz, Santurce, I believe that's Puerto Rico, which would be very cool. Also, at the beginning of the show, Ned Maddock says, big hello from Serbia. That might be a first, all the way over from Serbia. Let's see, where was I? Zach Brannigan, a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, watching from Charlotte, North Carolina, says, Charlotte, NC, baby. Woo! A little shout out to Ric Flair. Bry from Notre Dame, Indiana, a Benjamin Morrison fan. Bill Vincent, Gulf Breeze, Florida. Sean McDonald, Troy,
Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri, visiting relatives. And Michael Wags from Charlotte, North Carolina. I appreciate everybody that participated in today's roll call. A lot of fun as always. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do this show without the support of our YouTube channel members and our Pewter Platinum and Premier members. So let's give a shout out to our Platinum members, starting with Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel L. Rican, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zap Ranikin, RP89, Eric McMillan, Connor for Reals, Zach Jarvis, Kevin Thomas, and Mario Thomas. Thank you all so much for your support. We'll also put on the screen all of our Pewter Premier members. Once again, appreciate everybody for subscribing to Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel. All right, Josh, let's talk a little bit about the offensive side of the football, because there's been a lot of conversation about Rachaad White. I think with Rachaad, the Bucs certainly need him, but he needs to have a great season for himself more than anything else to really boost his stock.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He has the rare opportunity to show that he is one of the very few 3-down backs in the NFL. And what I mean by that is he's already an elite 3rd-down back. Most elite 3rd-down backs are seen as these smaller, quicker guys who can't really win in between the tackles on 1st and 2nd down. And most 3rd-down backs aren't considered the elite pass protector that Rachaad White already has. So when you look at him as a pass catcher, you look at him as a pass protector, he's got the 3rd down part down, and he's got the size to be an early down back. He hasn't had as much success as I think a lot of people would have wanted, himself included, over these first few years, especially when it comes to his yards per carry. I think he's in a really interesting position this year where the team has found their identity as a running football team. We saw that back half of last year. We saw it with Bucky Irving, who is absolutely special in terms of his ability to stay on his feet through contact and just bounce off of contact and create after contact. White isn't that type of creator, but he also was hampered the first couple of years in the NFL because the Bucs didn't have a great run blocking offensive line his first year in 2022. Then in 2023, Dave Canales really wanted to get that mid-zone run game going. Didn't really work. It didn't suit Rachaad. It didn't suit the offensive line. Liam Cohen tried it the first half of last year. And then in the second half, not only did Bucky go off, but Rachaad White was a much more productive runner himself running in that gap scheme. So if he, even as a complementary piece, averages 4.6 yards per carry, running in a scheme that works for him and works for this offensive line, plus all the things he can do on 3rd down, he actually has an opportunity to create himself a pretty good payday coming out of this, most likely not with Tampa Bay, but securing him and his family's future, which I think is a really cool opportunity for him. And then that would cascade to the team because now you have 2 really good backs who you can interchange and make sure that you're not running Bucky Irving into the ground.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest concerns for Bucky is because, he didn't even really take over the reins until 2 months into the season or whatever it was. And just by his size and nature alone, he's going to get hit pretty hard. And I don't know if he can always hold up for a 17-game season. He's still very important. And that's why Rachaad has such value as a guy that you can never worry about him when he's on. He might not have the big breakaway run that Bucky Irving will. But also, Josh, I feel like Bucky, the next step for him in one area specifically is his ability to stay on the field for passing downs, because I don't know if the pass blocking was always there for Bucky.
It's certainly not as good as Rachaad White. There are very few backs in this league who are. He is just small. And I mean, he's got pretty good form. His eyes go where they need to go most of the time. He wasn't perfect, But even if he's in perfect position, there are going to be times where he just gets steamrolled. It's just the nature of his size. So can he do everything that Rashad can do as consistently on third down? No, but he still brings more value. What the challenge for Josh Grizzard is finding the right dose of both to get the maximum out of the position. And that's obviously, more Bucky, but it's making sure that you have the right spots for Rashad. And the Bucs use their running back rotation a little bit differently than I think historically teams have done, which isn't we've got a first and second down back and we've got a third down back. It is oftentimes you get a series, unless somebody has been used 3, 4, 5 plays in a row and needs a spell. So they really do a full rotation, and it's important for both backs to be able to be on the field for all 3 downs. And I think that that'll be just as important for Sean Tucker trying to crack into some of that snap share as well. That'll probably be the biggest thing for Sean Tucker. I think this is probably big for him, right? This year, really important that he creates a role for himself to stay relevant in the league.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with that because I, like many, was infatuated with Sean Tucker when it became, hey, he completely balled out in that Saints game, won NFC Offensive Player of the Week. How do we get him on the field more? And we all clamored for it, and it didn't happen for a little bit. And then when they went in to New York/New Jersey to go and play the Giants, we saw Sean Tucker get a goal line carry. He scored a touchdown, but he also didn't have a lot of yards after that. He fumbled the ball as well. And I think that there is a reason why Sean Tucker, we know why he went undrafted, but there's a reason why he wasn't really considered too much to be the second string when it was Rashad and Bucky and then Sean Tucker. I'm not saying he's like the key piece to this offense, but I'm just curious, like how much more of a step that he can take. Like, does he have potential to be a starting running back, or is he kind of going to be this third string running back that can do kick returns as well?
Yeah, it is an open question. He certainly provided glimpses of special, right? I actually think out of the 3, he's probably got the best vision of the 3. It really comes down to that one. And for all the special things certain guys can do, I think it comes back to just like defensive coordinators, they're not going to put an excellent pass rusher out there if he can't defend the run, or at least they're not going to give him many snaps. With running backs, offensive coordinators, the most important guy on that offense is who?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Who's the most important guy on the Bucs offense?
Baker Mayfield.
He's not going to jeopardize Baker Mayfield. So if a guy can't block as a running back, he doesn't want him out there potentially ending their season by ending Baker Mayfield's season. So that really is the key for Sean Tucker.
Let's talk about Baker Mayfield, shall we? Because, the question of this show, the title of this podcast, of course, you could say every player needs to have their best season yet for the Bucs to make it to the Super Bowl. But we know unequivocally that is the answer when it comes to who your quarterback is. Now, Baker Mayfield has beyond lived up to the hype, I think, in his career with the Buccaneers. He didn't know what you were getting when he signed for a pretty cheap deal because he was trying to save his own career. Then he's winning Pro Bowl MVP, and then he gets the big contract. Sometimes you don't always live up to the big contract, especially in that first year where it's like, oh my God, like now making all this money, you might start pressing a little bit. Baker just elevated his game that much more. He's not going to be compared just yet to Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, guys like that. Understandably, I totally get it. But I want to see this year Baker, I want to see him in the Super Bowl. But the last 2 years when he's made the Pro Bowl, it's been as an alternate because somebody else is playing in the Super Bowl or declined to play in the Pro Bowl. I want Baker Mayfield to legitimately get voted into the Pro Bowl this year, if not get a couple of MVP votes as well. He's not going to win MVP, but I think he can get himself into the conversation, can he not?
I think he's got the supporting cast to absolutely do it. And I'm really excited to see the pairing with Grizzard. Now, I'm on record as saying Liam Cohen's a very, very special offensive coordinator, offensive mind, probably one of the top 5 minds in the NFL. The chances that Grizzard matches him, probably low, right? It's just the nature of being top 5 is there aren't many that are above you, right? Just waiting in the wings. But what I do think Grizzard can bring, and this is going back to the time he worked in Miami with Mike McDaniels.
Yeah.
McDaniels created an entire offense predicated on Tua Tagovailoa getting the ball out as quickly as possible. It's a superpower of Tagovailoa's. It's also a function of the fact that their offensive line was just terrible, right? So, and then they had the pieces in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I mean, just elite speedsters. So everything kind of worked well for him to create this offense that's designed for the quarterback to get the ball out faster. Okay. For make what you will of Pro Football Focus's grades, right? But one of Baker Mayfield's best seasons ever was his 2018 campaign, which was his fastest time to throw at 2.66 seconds, best time of his career, right? And that was really the season that gave a lot of Browns fans hope for what Baker could eventually be. These last two seasons, Baker has steadily brought down his time to throw. It was under 2.8 seconds in both seasons. I kind of feel like there's this opportunity if Grizzard can take elements of that McDaniels Miami offense and get Baker to work even quicker, get that time to throw under 2.7, get it back to that 2.66 that he was working with in Cleveland, working even more within the rhythm of the offense. I do think that there is this untapped potential with Baker Mayfield. The other aspect that becomes untapped, at least in his time in Tampa, he was one of the best deep ball throwers in the league before he got to Tampa. That is a part of his game, whether you want to blame Baker, you want to blame the receivers, you want to blame the offense, whatever it is a part of his game that has regressed from a production standpoint. So those two things, if he can get the ball out quicker and if the Bucs can operate more vertically and regain that production that he had in Cleveland as a downfield passer, those are the two things that I think if they can work together, if they can add into what he's been able to do over the last couple of years, maybe a little less of the scrambling that he has done some really cool highlight stuff. It's also worked against him a little bit. But I think if you were to have that trade-off, that's what gets you that named Pro Bowl. That's what gets you those all-pro votes that you're looking for, Matt. So I think that there's untapped potential with Baker that could lead to some of those outcomes that you're hoping for.
Yeah, there's still more room to grow for him, which I think is pretty cool. And hopefully, I mean, offensive coordinators leave every single year with the Buccaneers, but the fact that Baker somewhat has a continuity standpoint with Josh Grizzard, and Grizzard, let's have him be successful, but maybe stay for 2 years in Tampa Bay and then maybe go somewhere else. But I think we saw more creativity last season. I think we'll see a lot more of that this year. And whether it's, down the field or whether it's across the middle, whatever the case may be, I'm expecting some more highlight reel plays from the Bucs offense this year, which is kind of a scary thing to think of because they were already so productive. So we'll see how much better they can get. Let's get to a couple of super chats, shall we? Starting with Meets McGee. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Says, Jamel Dean will start. There's no way on God's green earth, Bowles, putting a rookie over Jamel Dean. He will get back to being that top 4 PFF corner before injury. Can you see Dean, let's just say injuries is not all of the reason, but it plays a little bit of a factor. Can you see Dean, is it more likely that he would lose his job like in the season than, say, losing it out in training camp?
I think the most likely way that he loses his job outright is he's injured at some point. Somebody comes in for him for a 3 to 4 week stretch, and coming out of that, the team's in a position where they feel comfortable, where it's the difference between that player and Dean isn't so much. Let's move forward rather than backwards. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's the most likely. To Meets McGee's point, and this is something I will give Todd Bowles a ton of credit for. I think the conversation around Bowles gets so myopic, but there's a lot of pros for Todd Bowles. There's a lot of things he does really well. And he is one of the most aggressive head coaches in the league at being willing to play young and rookie players, right? So go back to Chris Zyon just a couple years ago, right? They started an undrafted rookie free agent at one of the most important positions on the defense at this point, and nickel, right? The Bucs have been one of the youngest rosters in the NFL. A lot of that on the defensive side of the ball. So if somebody legitimately outplays Jamel Dean in training camp, Todd Bowles is more willing than most head coaches to just say, that's our starter. And I don't think that Jason Light or the Glazers are going to put any type of restriction based on Dean's paycheck that you have to play this guy because he's making $13.5 million this year.
Right.
But I think somebody would have to legitimately outplay him by a decent margin in training camp for that to happen. So the likelihood that barring injury, anybody other than Jamel Dean is the week 1 starter, I still think is pretty low.
Right.
But I do think that there's a path for Jacob Parrish or a path for Benjamin Morrison to take that job. I don't think that it's just handed to Dean.
Yeah, I think it's almost like if it's 50-50, it's Jamel Dean no matter what. It almost has to be 60-40, maybe even 70-30 for Morrison or Parrish to, win that job in the summer in training camp. Mike Wells, thanks for this $5 super chat. Says, really excited to see Cody Mauch next year. Last 10 games he played looked like a top 8 guard. Also, sprinkle in some more Devin Culp for us at tight end. Yeah, Cody Mauch, Ben Bredesen back as well. What's your projection for Cody Mauch, and can Ben Bredesen live up to his hype as well? Not hype, but the fact that they brought him back for more than.
Yeah, so with regards to Mauch, I was making the case last year. I think I wrote a couple different articles that I thought he was playing at a Pro Bowl level. And I had some stats to back it up in terms of I want to say his pressure rate allowed was top 2 among offensive guards in the NFC last year. So I think that Mauch kind of already stepped up to that Pro Bowl level, and I would expect it to continue. Him and Luke Gedeke, I think, are one of the best right tackle, right guard duos, especially when it comes to run blocking in the NFL, the way that they can double and climb. So I'm really excited for him as well, Mike. I think that this is an opportunity for him to really cement himself, not just inside of Tampa, but outside of Tampa, as far as one of the premier guards in the NFL. As for Culp, I mean, he definitely splashed towards the end of the season. I think he probably provides a higher pass catching upside than any other tight end on the roster. And he wasn't a bad run blocker coming out of Washington. Biggest issue with him was drops. His hands weren't consistent. And he showed pretty consistent hands towards the end of the year. So I think giving him more opportunities is probably a smart play. The Bucs tight end room, I would say, is really fascinating because on one hand, I think there's probably a low ceiling overall. On the other, I think that there is a possibility for this whole other side to be unlocked. A lot of that comes down to what Culp is able to bring. A lot of it also is the fact that Cade Otton's an extremely underrated run blocker as a tight end.
I think it goes a long way when they didn't really address tight end in during the draft, or not a ton of threats to some of the spots that are already there. And I like Devin Culp. I liked what I saw even with a really small sample size. I also like that Payne Durham, isn't going to go crazy with the amount of receiving yards, but he made some splashes with some touchdowns last year. And I think as a unit, they picked up the slack for when Cade Otton was out for a couple of games at the end of the season. Trustin Vorbeck, thank you for the $9.99 super chat. We see you a lot during the Peter Game Day show, so you must have known it was Josh and I today. But anyway, thank you for the super chat, Trustin. Good to hear from you. Says, I know you see Rachaad White eventually getting a payday outside of Tampa. Is there a scenario where we play the name your price game to an extent to keep this duo intact? Interesting question.
It is really interesting, and I don't have a great read on this. Rachaad White's value is probably around $5 to $6 million on the open market at this moment in time. That's certainly doable, and you see a lot of really good running games, where they do pay a veteran and still invest, a decent amount of draft capital in a second running back, right? So, and the Bucs didn't even invest a ton in draft capital in Bucky Irving. But I'm using Detroit kind of as the model in my head, where they went out and I want to say they gave David Montgomery a pretty decent contract the same offseason that they gave Jahmyr Gibbs. They drafted him in the second round. Then Gibbs went off in his rookie year, and they extended Montgomery this past offseason, or was it? 2 off seasons ago. So Detroit certainly invested in their run game in both draft and pay. I don't think you're going to see a lot of offenses invest in 2 highly paid running backs. So time horizon would have to matter on that contract, because I think as soon as Bucky is due for a big payday, they wouldn't want both on there. But you saw it with Detroit. Carolina tried to do it with Jonathan Brooks while also giving a pretty strong contract to Chuba Hubbard. So you see a lot of teams kind of doing this. So there is a way. I just don't know if Rashad – I think the Bucs would probably want to pay slightly below market value, and I don't know if Rashad wants to give them slightly below market value.
When there's a will, there's a way. And if you want a fantastic dinner tonight, there is a way to do that, and that's by getting a delicious meal over at Walk-Ons.
What an amazing comeback, Coach.
You're not kidding. I mean, we did lose the game badly, but coming to Walk-Ons afterward, the team got a much-needed win off the field.
Walk-Ons for the win.
Shout out to Walk-Ons. There were 3 in the Tampa Bay area, one over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third in Midtown, pretty close to Raymond James Stadium. So not far from going to see a Bucs game with some tailgating at Walk-Ons, then going over to the Bucs game. But they have happy hour pretty much every single day, 3 p.m. till close on Mondays, and 3 to 6. And then 6 to 9 on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Tons of great deals. 9 till close, that is. Sorry. Tons of great deals, whether it's the premium house pours, the hush puppies, or onion rings. Great food and drink. Can't go wrong when you head on over to Walk-Ons. Make sure you get a delicious meal over there soon. One last thing I want to talk about on today's show. The Bucs announced it today, officially, that Simeon Rice is getting inducted into the Bucs Ring of Honor. We spoke about that recently on a show, and then Simeon Rice got to speak today as well. It was really cool just seeing him reflect on his career. He got really emotional at first. So let's get to this video of Simeon Rice talking about this big induction.
The tears from my parents. I don't know if I really ever reconciled my father passed away. But that's I poured my heart into this sport. And if you know me, and I know some of the media that watched me play, I would be in practice 10:30 at night, working on what you see on this video. A lot of people thought, because it came so easy for me, that I was just talent. But what a lot of people didn't know, that's outside the purview of the sport, is that's all that meant anything to me. I never wanted to be a basketball player, and I was really good at it. Never wanted to do anything else. I wanted to run track a little bit, but the only thing that mattered to me was playing football.
His opening speech was pretty long, so this is another part of what it meant to him to be a Buccaneer, and he really wanted to represent for his family as well, and he felt he did that with this accomplishment.
I loved it a lot, and I didn't know how much it really meant to me until I see my little son, James, sitting there watching me, because he never got a chance to see it, but his grandparents did. And football was a game for me where I wanted to honor my mother and father. I wanted to make our name mean something. And I think I got that accomplished. Coming here to Tampa, I was leaving Arizona and I was an all-pro and I was rookie of the year and all that stuff. But I wanted to go someplace that I could impact and hope win. And they had the men to do it. I sat there with Monty Kiffin and Coach Marinelli, They told me I'm one of this defense.
Josh, you've seen Simeon Rice play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What's the first thing you think of when you hear his name and envision him playing for the Bucs, or his time with the Bucs?
Just dominant and gregarious, I think, would be the two words that just immediately come to mind. So, I mean, him playing next to Warren Sapp, growing up watching the Bucs, it just felt like there was going to be a sack on every play. Like it was an expectation. And it was just because the two of them were just so quick and so dominant. And I think this is long overdue.
Yeah.
I think it absolutely brings up the conversation again, like what is holding Simeon Rice back from being in not only the Bucs Ring of Honor, but in the actual Hall of Fame. Yeah. Because you stack his production up against anybody, and it's against actual Hall of Famers, and it matches. And I think for everything that he was on the field, from talking with people who covered him at the time, like he was just fun to cover too. Like he had the personality, right? So I think it might be a little bit of fatigue for the voters because there already are so many members of that defense that are in the Hall. But I think this is long overdue. It's great to see him get in. I think it's long overdue for his Hall case to be re-examined as well.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was brought up by Brian Glazer, the co-chairman, who said that it's long overdue that they rectify this oversight of Simeon Rice not being in the Hall of Fame. But hopefully this is one of the first things that really starts spearheading that campaign a lot more. And yeah, Rice talked for quite a while. Like you'd ask him one thing and there would be a story within a story. So I was very impressed with just being at that press conference today, hearing from him and seeing how important it was to him. And just one more time, that is going to be when the Bucs host the Cardinals in Week 13 on November 30th. The Cardinals, of course, are the first team that he played for. We have one more super chat. This one from Meets McGee. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Says, Bucs fans, let me introduce you to Todd Bowles again. He is the same guy that kept putting JTS, Devin White, and Rashad White over better players out there. This one might be out of context a little bit because
I think he's going back to me saying that there is a possibility for for Dean to not be the starter. I think that might be.
Yeah,
I could be wrong about that. So.
Yeah, well, either way, I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. I mean, I think they played Rashad White less, so that was kind of like the point of being a little bit more productive. But nonetheless, appreciate your comment. Appreciate everyone's comments and thoughts today. Just a couple of scheduling notes for everybody. Tomorrow, we are back on at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a guest on, but it's also a pretty busy day as we will be speaking to the Bucs offensive coaches. We'll talk to each position coach, get their thoughts on each room that they are coaching, the wide receivers, running backs, all of that good stuff. So we'll get some video from that and put it on the Pewter Report podcast. So that's tomorrow's show at 4 p.m. Bucs offensive coaches speak. And just a reminder again for everybody, we cannot advertise this enough. Not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, May 28th, we will have Bucs general manager Jason Light rejoining the show. He's been on before, so he is a friend of the program, but very excited to have Bucs general manager Jason Light coming on the show. So it's been a fun one again today. Thanks to everybody that came out and watched the show and participated in roll call as well. Just a reminder to everybody, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment as well. We are very close to 19,000 subscribers, so please subscribe. Tell your friends and family to subscribe as well. But another great show in the books. Happy Monday, everybody. For Josh Capo, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching, and we will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.